I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Rohit Ashwa Agarwal is a Vice President in Everest Group Global Sourcing Practice. Rohit Ashwa has rich experience across projects covering global business services growth and evolution strategy. In his role, he is focused on engagements and initiatives with global companies that focus on GBS shared service centers. Alex Chen, Managing Director at PwC, drives strategy, development, and transformation for PwC's acceleration centers globally. He has 26 years of experience leading programs to build technology and business services on a global scale, transforming business operations and implementing GBS strategy in the US and globally. Deborah Cobbs, Program Director of the Global Business Services Council at Conference Board, is a GBS industry veteran serving in enterprise, provider, and advisory roles. She currently works for leading GBS organizations on talent and model design and leads the Conference Board's GBS Council. Brenda Morris, Vice President at GBS at Boston Scientific, focuses on developing key capabilities to support the business's global growth. Brenda has over 20 years of experience leading manufacturing and supply chain finance for Boston Scientific. Eric Simonson, the managing partner at Everest Group, ensures that the firm's portfolio of research capabilities comprehensively addresses the entire global services space across geographies, services, and sourcing models. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Deborah.
And actually, this will be Eric. We are off and running. We'll set the context for today's session. There are basically 4 major components to what we'll cover in the webinar. The first is we'll go through a little bit of the context for why we did this study that is going to be featured throughout this, and some of the key definitions. Deborah and I will be doing this together. It'll take about the first 10 minutes of the session. We then will go into really kind of the meat of the insights, which will be along 2 vectors. One are the capabilities that organizations are using to skill their workforce, and Rohit will lead the primary discussion there. The second dimension that we'll cover will be the benefits or the outcomes that organizations are getting from applying those capabilities. And I will lead through the majority of the content there. Rohit's section will be about 20 minutes. We'll spend about 15 minutes on the benefits. And then we'll move into Q&A and wrap up. As mentioned earlier, everybody will receive a link to download the document from today. There is a Q&A box that you can enter questions in, and some we will try to answer as we go along through the webinar. Others will end up getting held and answered at the conclusion. And then finally, for everybody's entertainment, we've included a couple polls to keep everybody engaged as we go through the content. So be ready for that, and make sure you have your mouse readily available. Next slide, please. Deborah, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Let's set a little bit of a context for the study. To a great extent, COVID-19 was a perfect storm for GBS organizations broadly, but more particularly when it comes to talent. COVID has exacerbated an already challenged talent market, not only in terms of mobility, but also in terms of the skills that are required to deal with increased automation, analytics, and business enablement. We're in a market right now where you cannot hire externally. You can't get out of a skills challenge by going into the market. Mobility is probably going to be as high as it's ever been, not only in the broader employment market, but also in GBS. And this has increased the focus on ensuring that GBS employees have the right skills, not only for today's challenges, but also for future challenges. One of the things we noted in working with Everest is that the secret sauce or the best practices around skilling have not yet been established. We haven't yet tallied them. And today that will change. For the first time, we will have the opportunity to understand the drivers in skilling success in GBS. Conference Board and Everest Group participated, worked on this study jointly. And let me tell you a little bit, if I could, on the next slide, about the Conference Board. Most of you in the audience are probably very familiar with the Everest Group. You attend their very impactful webinars very often. But let me tell you a bit about the Conference Board. It is the US's oldest independent, nonpartisan, not-for-profit, member-driven research organization, and its think tank participation through councils. There are about 1,500 major organizations that support the Conference Board. There are a series of councils which focus on specific topics. I have the privilege of leading the Global Business Services Council, which has as its members 35 of the leading GBS organizations. If anyone in an enterprise is interested in learning more about either the Conference Board or the GBS Council, the Paige Lonbacken's email address is at the bottom, or you can always contact me. I'm also pleased today to say that two of our members, Alex Chen from PwC and Brenda Morris from Boston Scientific, whose organizations have performed very strongly in the survey, will be joining us to share some of their insights. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Let's talk about skilling. It's always good to set a basis for what we're going to talk about today. Skilling are post-onboarding interventions that are focused not only on the skills, the technical skills that employees need to do their jobs, but also the competencies and capabilities that they need to be able to succeed, not only for the enterprise, but also for themselves to develop very meaningful careers. Historically, we have seen classroom training. As we've become vastly digital, we see a lot of digitization in our training offerings, but skilling can include job rotations, can include cross-functional assignments, special projects, etc. So when we talk about skilling today, we're talking about a whole range of interventions that GBS organizations and enterprises more broadly deploy to make sure that their employees have the most up-to-date skills when it comes to not only doing their job, but pursuing fulfilling careers. So let me turn it over, I believe it's to Eric, to talk a little bit more about the study.
Great, thanks, Deborah. We've mentioned that sort of the backbone of a lot of what we're covering today is from a recent study, and want to orient people around what is sort of the methodology and how does that then relate to what we'll be covering. So the study format is primarily a survey. It's also complemented by interviews with some of the participants that we'll be able to give some examples along the way. What we do is break the responses into things that are indicators of capability maturity, which is the horizontal axis, and then a vertical axis of outcomes or benefits from looking at a particular capability. So this pinnacle model is focused on the capability of GBS organizations and skilling, and it's looking for the correlation between, as organizations have greater capabilities, what outcomes are they able to achieve. Now, what we will cover in the rest of the webinar is actually going to use that exact structure. So the next section, we'll first talk about the differences in capabilities that organizations have. The following section will then shift into the outcomes. The organizations who are in the upper right-hand box, we have termed pinnacle organizations, and they're the ones who are achieving both high outcomes and have high capabilities. They are going to be marked with green throughout the document, and we'll typically refer to them as the pinnacle organizations versus others. The blue boxes that you see on this slide will be the subsections within each of the two major sections. So with that, let's go ahead and go actually to our first poll, just to get everybody engaged. when you're answering this question around sort of what is your current focus on skilling and how's it changed, maybe think about this in terms of if you were able to execute the program in the way you would want to. So we're not trying to get how has work from home impacted your ability to focus, but rather your aspirations of what you intend to do with the program. What do you think is the change in focus? Has it gone up? Will it go down? Give just a few more seconds and then we'll look at the results. Okay, why don't we go ahead and wrap up? Okay, so Deborah, look, we've got the leading is some slight increase, but we have almost as many organizations saying a significant increase. So 80% saying an increase in focus on skilling. How does that compare to what you would have expected?
Well, I think that responds to the fact that we are probably walking into the tightest talent market in years in GBS. For those of you who love to monitor LinkedIn, the number of job postings has increased exponentially in the last 2 months. Perhaps, Eric, the slight increase in focus is due to beliefs about budget constraints, but I think that the numbers are cheerful.
Okay, great. All right, I'll hand it to Rohit on the next slide to take us through the capability results.
Hey, thanks, Eric. And as Eric described, a couple of slides back, we have divided the overall analysis into 2 parts. We have studied the capabilities that GBS organizations have developed to enhance and then kind of advance on their skilling initiatives, and then the outcomes they have achieved. Further, if we were to look at the capabilities that they have developed, we have further broken them down into 5 categories. So under vision and strategy, we look at the overarching philosophy that these organizations take towards their skilling initiatives. We look at what's the winning team formula that they put together. What's the size of the team? What's the structure of the team? How are they reporting to get best results? And then we look at various hows, of the program. So how is the program designed? How do they execute it? And what are the infrastructure investments they need? All those components will kind of uncover one by one as we move on, starting with the vision and strategy. So let's look at some of the details there. We kind of classified GBS organizations into 3 categories based on our analysis. Those who are helpers, which is the first category, which is basically limited scale and scope of work and a limited level of autonomy and influence that they have on the overall skilling strategy. Then we put the second category there, which is organizations which act as shaper of the strategy. This is where we actually see most of the mature organizations to be. Pinnacle organizations, which are kind of in the dotted green box, slightly ahead of other organizations, given that they are taking more responsibility. And then there's the last category, which is the leader. Not many GBS organizations are actually in that category as of now, but there is a still clear distinction between the Pinnacle organizations and others. And what Pinnacle organizations have done better is they have aligned themselves much more effectively with the enterprise goals. As a result of which, working backwards, they have established a clear picture of what the skilling needs are, what needs to be prioritized immediately versus a midterm, long-term goal. And I'll take one example here, is that for a leading global technology services company, their GBS operating from offshore region has now the Global Learning and Development Center of Excellence. And this Center of Excellence is responsible for L&D activities, not only in the GBS, which is a 600,000 FTE strong organization, but for more than 100 countries where the company has sales and delivery presence. So that's one of the examples of how they are kind of, taking on additional responsibilities.
Yeah, and I think, Rohit, there's a trend there as GBS organizations take on more human capital management. Actually managing skilling centers of excellence, skilling across an enterprise is a trend we'll see in the future. And I think we can get a little color here from Alex Chen of PwC, whose acceleration centers have been pretty active in upskilling for digital. Alex, give us some color here.
Sure, and for us, upskilling is really in the DNA of our firm and our enterprise. It's at the core of what we do and how we also continue to serve our clients. And with respect to what is our GBS or our acceleration center capabilities, really this is an upskilling journey for us around digital that started back in 2016. Right, and it was really driven by the forces, Deborah, that you and Eric have already mentioned, right? The tightening labor market, the increasing scarcity of talent, especially skilled talent that we were seeing in the GBS space, and the need for greater job automation and ensuring that our GBS organization had the capabilities and the knowledge and experience to do that. And so, over the time period, what has happened for us is we've gone through a very regimented and structured journey for digital upskilling. It started with the ability for all of our people to assess where they are through digital fitness, which is an application that we built to allow everyone to really get a sense of where they stood with their digital acumen. And then through a knowledge building program, which is really around using our digital hub tools. And in doing that, we're able to create very personalized journeys for individuals. So everyone could digitally upskill on their pace, in their area of focus. And from there, then we could build our upskilling as an organization overall, which really got into deep learning, which started to build our data engineering, our data science, our analytics capabilities. And now we're seeing that upskilling really turn into what we call kind of upperforming, because we're able to have now a much larger organization, a team in our GBS, both in the US, in our centers around the globe, all of whom are leveraging these skills. And we've even been able to build some elite teams of digital accelerators. So folks who have kind of committed to really helping the organization overall build their digital competencies and apply that knowledge. And we're seeing that turn into much greater both business-led and citizen-led automation. So the ability to apply automation on a day-to-day basis and to apply automation in our business operations. And it's built for us a whole set of new analytical skills, agile skills in terms of how our people work and think. It drives innovation and creativity. And we've also had our people develop their communications and storytelling skills. So it has added a whole layer to our GBS organization that several years ago, we were much more limited in. So this is the journey we're on today. It continues for us, but it's really been built on a very structured and thoughtful strategy that's really part of the overall enterprise strategy.
So a really strong ripple effect throughout the organization.
Yes, and the knock-ons continue, and the impact continues to multiply for us today.
Great.
And,
Rohit, I think
that's very interesting, Alex, and I couldn't help but notice that as we look at the drivers, which have really been the force behind how some of the organizations have achieved better results. There's a lot of parallel I can draw to what you just said, and Deborah pointed out, right? Is that interestingly, not that any of the driver which we covered, which are highlighted on this page are not important, but the organizations that achieve those differentiated results, the pinnacle organizations, they focused mainly on kind of improving the effectiveness of their workforce and the quality of delivery. They wanted to meet the evolving enterprise and business needs, have that right kind of skill, build ahead of the demand, provide the right opportunities to their employees, and also do that effectively. So to be able to optimize the cost of both talent acquisition and the cost of delivery. And as a result of which, we see a little bit more of this when Eric discusses outcomes, but they have achieved employee experience and retention, promoted innovation as well. But that's not how they started. That's a byproduct of some of these initiatives. Whereas when we look at the blue dots on this chart, we see that the other organizations, they kind of have a mixed approach to what has been driving them. And then that's pretty interesting, in terms of how the results start to vary in some of these organizations. Uh, Moving on in terms of, we talked a bit about the overall philosophy that these companies have, but moving on and talking about what is the winning formula in terms of the team you need to put together, because, as everybody has been saying, this is an uphill task. The challenge is real, and to be able to provide the right kind of environment and right kind of momentum to these initiatives, it is very important to think about the team very differently, if you want to achieve those different results. And what we are seeing, I would highlight three key points with regards to the team and role of the skilling organizations within the GBS. Number one is that the role of these teams is much enhanced as in Pinnacle organizations as compared to some of the other organizations. So they play a very important role across all types of learning, various functions as compared to the other organizations. You can see the variations in the green pie charts and the blue pie charts. Pinnacle organizations have joint responsibility given to their skilling teams as compared to some of the other organizations. Not just that, most of the Pinnacle organizations actually have a dedicated team that rolls right up into the head of the GBS or head of some business unit. So there's a lot of accountability and sincerity behind these programs. In fact, we increasingly see dedicated talent transformation or other similar leadership roles emerge in these organizations. And also the third point, in terms of the skills they have within these teams, the focus is on building a team that can enable the broader GBS organization to do more versus a team which is more focused on execution. So we have a lot of SMEs focused on project managers and likes as part of these core team. And I think one of the core fundamentals that a lot of L&D leaders need to think about is that as they envision a very different GBS organization in future, they'll think about a very different approach to L&D that itself. And those are some of the key learnings here. And then that was a little bit about the team structure. We'll keep peeling this further, and we'll move on and talk a little bit more about how the programs are designed, because there again, we see some very stark differences in how the Pinnacle GBS organizations have approached this as compared to the other GBS organizations. But there are some actions which we have identified which clearly impact the outcomes and the pace at which these organizations achieve the results. A couple of very clear gaps is that one, Pinnacle organizations are investing much more senior leadership time, whether it is in terms of planning the skilling initiatives, identifying the gap areas, putting some additional momentum behind these initiatives. They are definitely investing more. As you can see, the green triangles are ahead of the blue ones. Another key aspect is, as most of the organizations, kind of start on this journey or try to accelerate this journey, you need to know what the gap is. Part of which is knowing what you want to achieve, but part of it is also having a very clear idea of what you have. So whether it is about having very clear taxonomies, having a centralized repository of the kind of skills you have today, and not only focusing on the kind of work you are doing. I have X FTEs in financial shared services, Y in HR shared services. No, drilling a bit deeper and looking into what are the kind of skill sets I possess, and what portion of my workforce is kind of requiring a upskilling in the same area versus they are better to be retrained and redeployed into other areas. That is another key aspect to accelerating some of the journeys. Relatively limited gaps in terms of getting it right to get the employees to open up, talk about these needs, and in kind of aligning some of their future career paths to the skilling needs. But what we definitely see, is companies really trying to do things differently. For example, a Japanese conglomerate, their GBS organization, they went ahead and proactively initiated a big exercise to work with their CIO office to think about the taxonomies and the structure of IT organization 3 to 5 years ahead, so that they can leverage the base skills that exist in the organization to create the right career pathing, and then kind of reduce the dependency on external hiring. Similarly, US bank, their GBS, is targeting to hire about 70% of their niche skills internally, because they are pretty keen that if they are able to identify the right base skills and provide that journey, they can not only accelerate and reduce the hiring time, but they can also have a talent which will meet productivity goals faster, and also probably improve the retention as well. I'll move on and start talking about employee engagement, because I believe that you can have the perfect program, but if you're not able to engage your employees meaningfully, it's very hard, in fact, impossible to achieve the right results. And then we have assessed various aspects of engaging an employee, and we see that Pinnacle organizations, as you'll see in terms of the green bars being ahead of the blue bars across the board, they are doing more of almost everything here. They have accelerated career paths for the top performers. They are promoting competitiveness internally to create that positive culture of learning. They are providing non-monetary rewards as well to sustain. And then some of the ways they have achieved this is a couple of things that we found interesting. Is one, unrestricted access to their workforce, to the learning and development infrastructure. So no discrimination, no boundaries. Of course, there is a pattern to it, but open it up for all. And second is, rather than a kind of metric-driven approach only to promote learning, they're promoting learning as one of the core values. Alex talked about this a little bit, that it's part of their DNA. So some of the organizations who have achieved best results have adopted learning as a core value in the organization, and then we've seen some dramatic results, how it kind of naturally becomes an important initiative.
Yeah, these are Rohit, these are really astounding results. And when I look at organizations that GBS organizations that established a North Star, I don't recall in recent memory whether I've seen a GBS organization say that one of their North Star pillars is continuous learning. It may be customer centricity, accuracy, etc., but not continuous learning. So I think that's that's something to explore. But let's explore what Brenda has to say relative to continuous learning in Boston Scientific. Brenda's organization is very focused, and it would be helpful to understand, Brenda, how you've implemented a culture of continuous learning.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. I think that to some extent we have done what you said, is that we've made people, our team, one of our North Stars. We call it our winning team, or our global high performing team. As Boston Scientific in itself has 6 core values, and 3 of them tie towards people and engagement, in the sense that we have caring as a value, which extends to our customers, our patients, but to our own employees, global collaboration, and we are a global team with 7 captive centers around the globe, and then diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what we've done is we have created what we call the GBS Global High Performing Team. It has 3 pillars under it. One is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. One is our Employee Action Committee, which really focuses on engagement. And then the third is L&D. And so from that learning and development perspective, we take the Boston Scientific philosophy of 70-20-10, which is 70% is on the job. So we focus a lot on stretch assignments, projects, and opportunities. 20% is on the relationships that you have, and about 10% is focused on specific coursework. So we are, I call it a volunteer army. We don't have a L&D specialist or any full-time people on our team. We do it all through engagement, and it's a combination in that L&D from a utilizing the courses that Boston Scientific provides, as well as a third-party group that has a curriculum specifically for GBS, which based on what Rohit was saying, we've actually tried to say, what are those skills that we need in the future as GBS is trying to develop? We've looked at where we believe our gaps are, and we are utilizing that curriculum, which is online based on different levels. It can be tailored for each individual person for GBS skills. So together with that, we've gotten great engagement, and it provides our team with opportunity for development. So our team is our most important asset to be able to deliver that, and it is one of our pillars to ensure that we're ready and people feel engaged.
That's
So
pretty
I'll throw it back
insightful.
to you, Rohit.
Well, that's pretty insightful, Brenda. In fact, I'll react to it while we look at the next page, because you talked a little bit about how you are also kind of focusing more on training and kind of then leveraging some of the content. So what we have seen is that, like with everything else around us, right, the technology interventions in all initiatives have increased, and it's amazing to see how things have become accelerated, simple, and more effective. Within the skilling journey, we see that while the most advanced or the most prominent use is of the learning management systems or the content and assessment vendors, and we have kind of listed down a few which we see are the most commonly used one at the bottom. But what we definitely saw is that whether it is the pinnacle organizations or others, companies can still increase the utilization of some of the external partnerships, whether it is some of those technology tools and vendors, or whether it is some of the other ways to engage with startups or universities in a more disciplined, more structured manner. But what is interesting is that there is a conscious thought process among the pinnacle organizations to not necessarily do everything themselves, and look at how can they access a better technology, if it helps them improve the speed to execution and also improve the employee experience. They are kind of looking outwards. So very interesting in the partnerships that are being created there as well. And I would move on and cover one last aspect with regards to the capabilities that companies have built, which again, I'm sure a lot of leaders who are listening to us today, they'll be thinking about that. All of this sounds great, but where do I get the money to invest in this? Because that's a common theme. One of the most interesting observation is that if you look at the budget per FTE that the companies are allocating to this, we don't see a lot of difference. So both the Pinnacle and other organizations, on an average, ranged at a less than $500 per FTE annually. And even as part of their overall GBS budget, on an average, there are not several differences. Some companies investing more than others, but the difference lies in where they are investing this. So if you see the bar in the green, the GBS organizations are mostly focused on execution and employee engagement, where they're investing about 2/3 of their budget, whereas the Pinnacle organization, the other organizations have a little less than 1/3 allocated purely to content design. Again, Brenda mentioned how they are kind of being more effective in getting the right content, right training material. So, choosing the right areas where that internal investment is needed, and where can you leverage the external ecosystem better, and then not just external, the enterprise ecosystem, because a lot of these initiatives are not only limited to the GBS. Many of them kind of cut across various parts of your organization. The companies are also becoming innovative in terms of how they are sourcing the money required, and this is something which is not just a GBS responsibility, but also responsibility of the broader organization, business units. So how do you make everybody chip in? That's another differentiator we saw. And the last point I'll cover here is how companies are also investing in making some of the workplace changes to kind of support their employees naturally, be more motivated to learn, kind of just position themselves, allow those interactions, allow people to come together within teams, across teams, And COVID has actually provided a great opportunity because everybody's thinking about what do I do with a lot of, probably spare real estate if a portion of my workforce is going to work from home or we're going to be in a hybrid model. And companies are thinking, some of them, on how do I make some changes to not only promote the social distancing in the short term, but also make more digital workplace in the long term, where some of these learning activities can be further, supported. Uh, that was some of our key takeaways in terms of, uncovering the differentiated practices on the capability side. Let me hand it over back to Eric to talk us that what has been the kind of impact those companies have achieved.
Thanks, Rohit. So we're done with the horizontal axis, and now we're going for the vertical axis. There'll be three things that we'll hit on: cost impact, operational benefits, and strategic things that help increase outcomes. Before we officially get into this, though, we're going to force everybody to use your mouse again and make sure everybody's still awake and with us. So we asked earlier, what do you see happening with the focus? And the answer was clearly more focus. This is now really getting into, okay, are you just going to put more into it, or do you need to actually improve the program of skilling? Is there scope for that? So anywhere from no, it's already pretty good, we just need to execute it, all the way up to significant need for improvement to potentially kind of an overhaul of the strategy. All right. So we'll let this go just a little bit to it. I think that's probably good if we can close it and show the results. So maybe not too surprisingly, we have the a true majority saying significant room for improvement. Deborah, if you had to speculate on kind of why is it so heavy there, what would be your guess?
Well, again, I think we go back to COVID. COVID's put a magnifying lens on skills, on talent mobility, on team aspirations, and frankly, GBS has to catch up very, very quickly, or will endanger the model. As much as we'd like to think that robots will take over, it is still a human capital business.
True, and I think as we're seeing, we use the word human capital, but we do not measure and manage and use the same accounting for human capital that we do for physical plant capital. It's a squishier approach thus far. Okay, slide 20. Just a headline on these three things. On cost impact, organizations are reporting roughly about a 3x benefit for the Pinnacle. The big headline, though, is 80% of non-Pinnacle organizations are not actually trying to measure. So there's just a pure measurement challenge here that needs to be tackled. Operationally, we'll dive into this, but we see both improvements in sort of core operations, but also in human capital operations, ability to actually get and retain human capital. And then on the business impact, a whole range of benefits here, from the employee experience to strategic agility. I think for many organizations, this is actually why they are most motivated, because as Deborah just said, the humans are the short end of the stick right now, and the hard thing to solve for. It appears to only be getting more challenging. Next slide, please. So looking at cost first, on the left-hand side, we broke this into three different metrics that organizations may look at, whether that be what's the benefit they're getting from the direct spend on skilling, to how the increased skill helps reduce operating costs, to actually reducing hiring costs by maybe avoiding needing to hire as much, more internal. And all these, you see roughly a 3x benefit from the Pinnacle to the other in terms of the returns. In some ways, the more important part is actually on the right-hand side of the page, and all the blue bars that are up in the 80%, that a lot of the organizations couldn't even really answer this, because they're not even looking at the cost metrics in this way. So we think there's a lot of room for improvement here, and as organizations need to take these things more seriously, there'll be a lot of basic basic infrastructure being built just to be able to really manage these things more holistically. Let's turn now to the operational benefits. What you see here is really big gaps between the green pinnacle and the other. In fact, these may be on a proportionate basis the largest gaps we'll see in this entire readout of the results. An example of the types of benefits, one GBS organization used an amped up skilling program to train over 85% of its employees in automation and basically accelerate their automation program, repurpose people whose jobs were being impacted by it, and to basically get to not have to go through the long hiring cycle. When I look at this, I see two main clusters. The middle two sets of bars are really kind of process and operational things. So is it efficient? Is it productive? The first and last are really talent things. Both am I finding all the people that I need, and am I keeping the people that I have? So in some ways, operationally, it's not just, okay, are you doing the work? It's, is there a human plugged in and able to do the work? Which I think is a key part of smooth operations. I think we've all dealt with people being on vacation, unexpected loss of a team member. Those have a real impact. And if skilling can help you on some of those things, that's a wonderful, wonderful outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Eric, I think this opens up a new frontier because we always think about skilling and a relationship between skilling and maintaining or reducing the efforts required to attract new talent. But I think for the first time, we're seeing the relationship between process efficiency and productivity and skilling. I think we historically have always assumed that there was a relationship, but we're starting to see some acknowledgement and measurement. And I think, Brenda, your organization has been really focused on skilling, maintaining metrics relative to skilling and operational performance. You want to share a little bit about what Boston Scientific's been up to?
Yeah, sure, Deborah. I think for us, it is very clear, and whether it's COVID or not, I think we started our journey potentially on automation well before COVID, but it really accelerated through this last year. And so, we feel fortunate that a lot of our specific skilling had been on either automation for those and development of a team that actually does our automation, as well as I think Alex referenced it, just an awareness and basic understanding of the opportunity for automation and how that can impact and benefit our end-to-end process. So when we look at it, we actually look at all of our end-to-end processes. We set goals every year for productivity and process improvement. And now we have another arsenal in our bag, so to speak, with automation and capability. So we are continually focused on quality. And in some cases, I think, automation actually produces higher quality. I think somebody was talking before about vacation. It doesn't take vacations. It doesn't sleep overnight. So it absolutely has improved our quality, as well as provided some capacity through automating tasks and certain capabilities and being able to get that out from a customer satisfaction. We're also able to deliver more solutions to people. So it really has, we've seen it in our metrics. We set goals, we measure those goals monthly and year to date. And so we are now counting on the skilling that we're giving to be able to do that. And I focused a lot on automation, but in general, we are looking at all different types of productivity improvements and ensuring that we went through a process a year or so ago where we retrained everybody in our GBS organization on value improvement so that they could actually, because the ideas come from the team members and not just a few people trying to identify opportunities. So that's where we have a very big focus on productivity and process efficiency with the group as a means to, I guess, enhance the value that we bring to the company in addition to the services. So that's where we could not have done that without the skilling that we've done over the last few years.
Thank you, Brenda. Next slide. This is the last of the three forms of benefit, which is strategic. And again, given kind of gaps on sort of all of the pinnacle versus others. The three largest are the first one, helping the GBS evolve to meet business needs. The third, positioning the GBS as a talent hub. And then the last, the project readiness of employees. And kind of the theme that I notice on those is those are all in some ways a form of agility, to be able to respond, to be able to change, to be able to move against something. And I think, you know, in a world that we all talk about that's changing fast, and you have things like COVID and new regulations and Brexit and all this, agility is, you know, super important. If the humans can be ready for it faster and support it, it's a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a story here, Eric, on agility and business outcomes. And I think, Alex, you've got some good observations about how you build in skilling to achieve some strategic advantage. Granted, a company like PwC is human capital intensive. Your assets are your people. But I think there are lessons for all GBSs from the way that you've looked at outcomes and strategic advantages by upskilling, reskilling, cross-skilling your GBS team. Do you care to comment?
Sure. I'd actually like to share an example that happened recently in a meeting that I was in. So, like I think almost everybody else involved in this webcast, we live in spreadsheets, right? And we're in data and we're combing through and we're doing our analysis. But even through the pandemic now, with the skilling that we've done, I recently sat in a meeting where we had the process owner, some of my team in GBS, you know, other managing directors around the table, around the video. And what we were doing is we were combing through an Alteryx script, right? And we were all able to kind of understand how that script was working. So adopting different technology, speaking a different language. For us, it was a very meaningful example of how we are continuing to leverage the technology and the capabilities, and we're building a language around those skills that is allowing us to collaborate even in a virtual environment. And so to be able to do that and to have that transferability of the skills, I think that's an example of the agility that's probably happening in many of our organizations. But what it really represents for us with respect to our GBS is the evolution or the transformation of the role that we're playing, right? We're seeing through our skilling efforts, the idea of in many of our operations in our centers, in the acceleration centers for us, we had process managers or word processors or data processors in the past. Today, we now have data scientists, right? We had folks who were managing and administering systems. Now we have digital accelerators who are working on bringing those digital capabilities. We used to have folks who managed contracts with our suppliers or our vendors. Now we have those same people who are playing roles as supplier and performance managers. So you see this evolution because 6-7 years ago, we maybe didn't have those skills in our GBS organizations, certainly not at scale. And now with the skilling efforts and adding the digital capabilities, we now have professionals who have experience and knowledge and expertise, and they're able to apply that to support the business. So they're relevant. And the individuals want that upskilling. They want those opportunities that come forward as a result. And that's what we're really experiencing in our organization. And frankly, from the days when often, especially in your centers, everything was often focused around cost arbitrage, we have really evolved and are moving to much more of a talent arbitrage model. It's about the ability to serve the firm and create value because we have the talent and the expertise in our GBS to make that happen. If you don't have it, you don't have the opportunity to play that role. And I think that's really, Eric, to your point about the agility, what it leads to is the ability to impact the business in a very different way because you've built the skills. So,
I think we're ready for the next slide. We're kind of entering the final end stages. We'll get to questions.
I'll take this opportunity, to invite those who are with us today, but have not taken this survey. You can indicate your preference to take the detailed study in the Zoom survey, which is online now. And if you choose to do so, we will benchmark how you are doing versus the rest of the Pinnacle and other GBS organizations and schedule a one-on-one readout for you with our recommendations. You will also see the survey link in a post-webinar email. And also there's a link in the document, which will be emailed to everyone in 1 to 2 business days.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll summarize quickly. So the big implications that we see are, one, skilling is important enough. There ought to be an actual dedicated skilling team. It needs to be actively managed. Second, we see a big correlation on collaboration. That this isn't just sort of, hey, let's run this one-off program. It really needs to align to the business value, and that cuts across many dimensions. Third, the skill inventory and the gaps is a critical baseline and to work against. You can't really impact something if you don't know what it is. You can't have a sense of where is it headed. It's just sort of you're chasing vapor if you're not able to kind of track it. Fourth, the employees are critical in this. You can't just it's not like rewiring a machine. These are humans. They need to be bought in. They need to understand. It needs to be part of the culture. Benefits to them in terms of mobility, career paths, et cetera. And then finally, we also saw a lot of the Pinnacle organizations being able to accelerate what they were doing by smartly leveraging external systems, partners, content, experts, et cetera. And so even though it is a journey you have to own for your own organization, it's a lot to learn and leverage from others. So with that, we'll go to the final section on Q&A. And I'm going to pose a couple questions. People can still keep submitting them. I'm doing triaging here, so I apologize if I know we're going to miss some. The first one, I'm gonna Deborah, ask you this, and I'm paraphrasing what somebody asked. And basically, I interpreted one of the questions as, are organizations actually being honest with themselves about the degree to which they need to reskill?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I think implicitly most GBS organizations that I come across, and certainly members of the Conference Board's GBS Council, do understand the need to reskill. I think they're honest. I think if you look at the Pinnacle results, those who reach Pinnacle status know how to implement. This is about implementation and execution. I don't think that the GBS community broadly doesn't understand that there's a need. It's really about putting in place the interventions, the desire, the processes to follow through.
Okay. Next, there were a couple questions around kind of baselining of skills, and we talked about skill repository. I'm going to maybe first quickly, Rohit, ask you, can you talk a little about how you've seen organizations establish a baseline, any kind of clever ways or watch outs? And then we'll ask Brenda and Alex, how have you approached baselining? Has it been an important part, any sort of learnings you would have for people?
So Eric, this is one of the more difficult parts of the overall planning. We have seen companies use multiple channels, such as internal surveys, creating, linking it to their internal HRIS systems, and making sure that all the certifications, project experience, and other relevant aspects of the employee skill sets are kind of internally mapped. There are several new tools that companies are using. And also, I think the focus is not just on the baselining, but also on having a more of a digital and agile approach where companies are able to update it, if not real time, on a periodical basis. So that's a little bit about that. We can talk more about it with interested attendees later. Alex, Brenda.
I'll jump in first. I mean, as I mentioned, what we did was invest in a very personalized baselining, right? So we had an application which we called our digital fitness app, and we gave everyone the ability to go ahead and do their self-assessments and understand where they stood. And then we built really around that an expectation and a culture that was supportive of that personalized learning. Right. So from that baseline, then you can add on things like badging and certification, and you can create those learning paths for the individual. And we've seen that be something that is self-reinforcing because people want it, right? It's relevant to them, and it allows each individual to kind of drive their learning at their pace and with their priorities. But it's the relevance that's really important that keeps it going. It creates the energy and momentum around it, or at least that's been my experience.
So we were slightly less scientific in the sense that we had more of a focus group approach, and first assessed where we thought we needed skills and where were our gaps, and then went back and worked with folks on where they thought we needed to focus our training towards those gaps. So, and again, you know, some of that is in experiences and the rest of it is in training, but we developed 7 key behaviors that we were looking for, as well as some technical capabilities. And as Alex mentioned, at different levels that it can be tailored to the individual and the role that they're in, so that people can then, we are utilizing online courses, either through Boston Scientific or through this third party, to be able to allow, some of them do have certifications, and you know, we recommend that for, depending on the people, the role they're in. So it is an evolution. It is a live process to ensure that the needs don't change, but they are varied by individual. And as I said, it is, we see a lot of engagement because the program itself is run by GBS employees who kind of do this as their nighttime job on top of their either service delivery or project management. So it's people that have interest in creating our learning organization.
Great, and we're down to just another minute or two. There was several questions that were asking, okay, who are the pinnacle organizations? What industries are these in the study, et cetera? And I'll provide kind of an overview there. So one, we don't name the pinnacle organization, so we don't put names by the dots on the earlier chart. Organizations who participate, when we do the readout with them, we'll tell them where their dot is, but it's not not something for where we talk about that publicly. I think there's an interesting thing which may end up sounding negative for some organizations, but it's worth understanding the full context. One of the things that we've seen in this is that some of the strongest performing organizations are those that classically you would describe as being people-centric, maybe professional services firms or organizations that have a lot of attributes like that. That being said, not all the pinnacle organizations fit that mold, and some of them are actually from sectors that you would think of as being a lot harder and maybe less valuing of employees. That kind of more just a big old back office. So it's there is I think those who maybe have spent more time in getting employees up to speed and helping them evolve their career path proactively may have a little bit of be starting the journey from a higher step, but there's certainly others that you may not have expected that are actually doing quite well. And with that, I think that takes us basically to the end of the discussion. We'll go through the questions we weren't able to answer and try to get back to people and those that we didn't end up covering in the rest of the webinar. Would like to thank all of the panelists and speakers, the partnership with the conference board on this, and look forward to continuing to track this space and what we can all do to advance talent. So, thanks.